and welcome to the Logistics with Purpose podcast, sponsored by Vector Global Logistics and Supply Chain Now. I'm your host today, Christy Porter, Chief Marketing Officer at Vector and co-host of the Logistics with Purpose podcast, where I get to have an incredible conversation again today. It is my dream to have these conversations every couple of weeks with leaders in impact and supply chain and environmentalism. And this is one that we've wanted to have on for a while. So I am delighted, Kate, that you're here with me. So welcome and introduction to Kate Williams. She is CEO at 1% for the Planet. I'm sure you've seen their logo everywhere. And now we're going to shed a little more behind the scenes light on their mission and what they do. But thanks, Kate. I'm so glad you're here with me today.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the warm welcome, and I'm glad to be here too.
Yes, absolutely. We've had some conversations over LinkedIn and behind the scenes, and so now it's finally time that we record something for everybody to get to participate in as well. So before we jump into 1% for the Planet, I want to ask you just some quick round questions. You jump in with the first thing that comes to mind, and I'm going to try not to dig into them too much because they're usually so interesting. I want to spend time on them as well. But so first of all, favorite book.
I'm going to answer with two
Okay.
parts. My sort of favorite all-time book is Anna Karenina, which I am
Oh,
reminded that I need to reread, but that has like long time been just like a
wow.
favorite novel. And then more recently, The Overstory by Richard Powers is a book that's really stayed with me, and it's also a novel, and I feel like I learned more about trees in that book than I ever did in any science classes I took. It's a really amazing story, and just he's a fabulous writer.
Okay, fantastic. We love book recommendations around here, so I will have to note that because I haven't heard of it before. Early bird or night owl?
Absolutely early bird.
I wish I could share that. What's your favorite hobby?
It's a favorite hobby that I don't get to do very much, but I
Okay.
really enjoy pottery.
Oh, oh, very cool.
I've done a little bit of it, and it's a like slightly aspirational favorite hobby, but every time I've done it, I just like
It
immediately get to
counts.
flow state. So
You've done it, so it counts. That's all that
mhm.
matters. What is one thing that boosts your mood?
Taking my dog for a long walk where we can just like not have any sort of time restrictions, just like to go for a little adventure wander with her.
Oh, what kind of dog?
A golden retriever.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah, so she's up for any adventure.
Oh, absolutely.
Um, what is this is going to be a hard one. What is your favorite place in nature that you've ever visited?
It's actually not a hard one
Oh,
because I do have a favorite place, and it just so happens that I get to go to this favorite place this weekend. So, Chaco Canyon, which
oh,
is there's the Chaco Culture National Park, is in New Mexico where I am right now, and it's a place that I first visited in my 20s, and it's stayed with me. It just has this
oh,
incredible sort of vastness of space and like amazing history of the ancestral Puebloans. And this weekend, we have a campsite reserved for the full moon
oh,
night, and it just has this like immense dark sky. So it's like a really incredible place to
oh,
be.
fantastic. I am trying to visit. I just a couple of weeks ago visited my 15th national park. So I'm trying to hit them all. So now I'm really looking forward to getting down there and seeing that one as well. That's a good setup for that. Well, thank you for sharing all of those. That always helps us just to get to know people better and hear more about what's going on in their lives and, again, more behind the scenes information. And so, speaking of, I'd love to hear more about your childhood and background. So, tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what life was like.
Yeah, I grew up outside of Boston in a little town called Belmont. And, I'd say I had a really awesome childhood. Like, I had incredible parents who were super supportive, both, worked hard. So I had like two working parents, and that was just life. And they were, very present for me. I'd say a big feature of my life was growing up as the youngest with older brothers. So I was on a
Made you
mission
tough.
to keep up at all times. And that was, had its challenges, but I think was also valuable. And, I'm grateful. I'm very, still remain very close to my brothers. And then I would, in terms of kind of, something that maybe is a little more directly influential of where I am now is I didn't grow up with, our family didn't do like big wilderness adventures or
Okay.
anything like that, but we definitely had a backyard and just like a lot of time like running around in the backyard and then like going up to stay in places like Maine on a lake or on the ocean and nothing hardcore, nothing fancy, but just like a lot of time, like unstructured time in like kind of what I would call like backyard wilderness in the
Yeah.
sense that like for me as a kid, it felt like, we built a treehouse. And I realize as I say this, it all sounds very like kind of 2.2 kids and 1.3 cars or whatever. But I'm very grateful for it. It was super special and lots of like dirt under my fingernails and running around outside, which I think has definitely shaped who I am.
For sure. So was clearly it had a big impact on you. Was it immediately like a love for the outdoors, or were you like, I love being outside, but I also love being inside in front of a TV, or were you just always wanting to be outside?
Well, the TV is a funny thing to mention because my mom had very strong views on like
Okay.
TV being just like evil. And so she like when we were naughty, like the threat was always like, I'm gonna cut the cord on that TV. So, definitely more oriented toward being outside. And I'm grateful that I happened to be born not only into my particular family, but also at a time when like, we just didn't have a lot of screens. Like if you
Sure.
were gonna watch a TV show, it was like at the time that it was at, and there was no
Right.
way to record it or any of that. But I would say that like, kind of aha outdoor moment happened for me when I was 18. And that was when I did, right after I graduated from high school, my graduation gift was to go on a month-long trip in the wilderness. And
Oh, wow.
that really was the like super pivotal moment because that was when I realized like kind of all of the like backyard
Yeah.
wilderness stuff had prepared me, but this was I was in the big mountains of Wyoming and I just like
Oh,
fell in love with the big mountains. And I also um kind of unexpectedly had the chance to fall in love with like doing a hard thing with a group because we
mm,
had some challenges like lots of snow. One of our instructors broke his leg. Like
wow.
it was a challenging trip and I loved it. Not because I would wish a broken leg on anyone or any
Yeah.
of those hardships, but more like just the way the group came together to navigate this hard situation. I just got, kind of almost in a nerdy way, like curious about like what is it that enables groups to do hard things together. So the wilderness and that sort of interest in like organizing a group to do stuff and I found myself having some leadership responsibility in that setting, which was also very
Yeah.
unexpected for me. So all of that, like I would say that 1 month of my, as an 18-year-old was very pivotal for me in terms of me sort of deciding I want to do this for my life, this being some combination of the wild places and the group aspect of it.
Very cool. And what did you learn by growing up in a house full of with brothers?
I learned that I had to, kind of be able to stand up for myself. So I
Mm,
think just, there's some like toughness that
yeah.
came from that because, I had great parents that did not supervise every move that we made. So like, we would play pretty rough games in the backyard and I had to like keep on up. So and I just like assumed it wasn't at that time that I thought like, oh, they're boys and I'm a girl. It was just that like they're my brothers and
Yeah.
we have to like do stuff together and I have to keep up with them. So I do think it helped me to, just as a human kind of believe in my capabilities. And then as I, moved out into the world and realized like, oh, they're guys. I'm not a guy. What does that mean? What does that not mean? And for most of
Mm,
my life, it has, I've felt like I've just kind of, moved forward with that sort of understanding of like, oh, I get brothers. I can do
yeah.
this. So I think it was, there was some toughness and also just some, you know, relatability that I, earned in that way. And then there was also, just like a, and this I think is less brothers, but just our particular family, just like physicality, like we were just
Mm,
kind of always on the move. So,
that's awesome. Sounds like a lot of fun. Well, you continued as you talked about your love for nature in at the university, you were involved in outdoor programs, but you earned your degree in history from Princeton University. So why history and how did that continue to shape your path?
Yeah. The simple reason for why history is because I found it really interesting and I loved
Okay.
it. And, again, like big gratitude to my parents. They said, "Hey, if that's what you're passionate about, go for it." They didn't say like, like, is that going to like set you up for a, career or whatever. They were very, their take was like, if you're interested, you're going to be more of an engaged learner, and being a learner is the point. And
Yeah.
so I'm very grateful for that because, I have not gone on to become a historian, but the thing I loved about it is I was just like really interested in understanding the stories of
Mm.
places and people. And, I remember taking a Canadian history class and, I just felt like, is this work? Like I get to like sit around and like listen to these really interesting stories. So, I found it like just super fascinating. And I wrote my senior thesis on Native American fiction as a in
Wow.
English because there started to be written in English novels and different books by Native American authors in the 60s and 70s. It had been mostly sort of oral tradition or native language before that, and so I wrote about that as sort of part of the cultural movement of that time, and that was just super interesting for me and, has remained interesting just understanding, people's connection to the land. What does it mean to be native or indigenous? All those questions, which at the time were just interesting to me and felt important and have continued to be sort of part of what shaped my thinking about land and people.
Yeah. Well, on that note, so one thing we always learn about history is how it repeats itself. And so I'm curious, given your study, it's been a while since then. What are there some things that continue to kind of pop up in your mind that you learned during that time or that kind of reminisce or that, just pop up from time to time?
That's a very thoughtful question. I think without a whole lot of reflection, I would say, I would agree that it does seem like we seem to be kind of cycle
Hmm.
people.
Yeah.
And we, go through cycles. And I think one thing as I've gotten older and sort of moved into the sort of world and, as an adult, so which was not what I was when I was studying in college. I was a very young adult. I would say gaining an awareness of kind of power and fear as things that do motivate a lot of I would say the cycles that are not positive. So, efforts to retain or gain power, fear of losing control. I think those seem to be super powerful forces that do not support us moving in positive directions sometimes.
Hmm. Absolutely. Well, you also have an extensive volunteering experience just throughout the years. You're a board member somehow at several different organizations as well. So, I guess first, what motivates you? You certainly have plenty that could keep you busy. So, what motivates you to continue with those other commitments as well?
I think it's a great question because sometimes I do think like, why did I think this was a good idea? Um, but I think I have like both a curiosity and a commitment to like contributing to where I am. So for the most part, my board commitments over the last like couple of decades have either been about sort of connecting me to place, to where I am. So like
Mhm.
right now I serve on the board of Shelburne Farms, which is a Vermont-based organization, and my work at 1% for the Planet is very global. And
Yeah.
so like having that like ability to sort of connect in a meaningful way to, a place, and Shelburne Farms does work globally as
Mm.
well. They would want me to make sure I acknowledge that, but they are very much like, a sort of rooted in Vermont
Mhm.
place. And, serving on my town select board was also a way to really, contribute to the community that was, such a core part of us raising our family. And
Yeah.
I think it's been that the other board I've served on, over the years on in different occasions is the National Outdoor Leadership School, which is the school that, facilitated the experience I had when I was 18 in the mountains. I did a trip with that school. So, I have such a debt of gratitude for that experience. So, I'm not a philanthropist and can't like give back with dollars in the way that others can, but I do have, experience and passion. And so giving back in that way has been really meaningful for me.
Yeah. And then nobody's going to tell you, oh, I just don't have enough to do, right? So how do you, for those who are, everybody's passionate about something. So, but everybody also claims to be busy. So what would you advise people who are interested in giving of time or volunteering or being on a board who have that interest, but kind of aren't sure how to square that with their other responsibilities?
Hmm. I guess I'd come at it from two ways. One is I think like basically there's never enough time and there's never the right time for
Yeah.
anything. So at one level, I feel like if you care about something, just do it. And like Yvonne Chouinard has
Mhm.
a saying that I think is also utilized throughout Patagonia, but that I really appreciate. It's not always the right thing, but it often is, and that is commit and then figure it out. And
Mm,
I that has definitely been something that I have done in my life, is if you believe in something, if it's something you want to participate in, commit and then figure it out. And my experience has been that a lot of times you will find that once you commit, you know, ways of understanding how you can do it, support people and mechanisms will appear that you couldn't have known about until you committed. So I do think commit and then figure it out. And like, don't wait until the right time because usually there's not going to be an obvious right time, really, for anything, for taking that next big job, for like making a change in your family, whatever. My experience is that my own kind of steps forward have always felt like they're early, they're not what I expected, I'm not fully prepared, whatever. But then you take that step and you realize like, oh, you learn as part of doing it, and these sort of forces of support like emerge once you've made that commitment. The other thing I would say is I have committed, and then I've figured out like this is too much. So I have, taken steps where I've had to say like, "Ooh, my bad, I don't think I have time
mhm.
for this." So there was a board I went on to that was a regional board in the Northeast, and I felt really badly about it, but I realized once I got into it is the way it was structured in the time, I couldn't do it. So I backed out. So there, that's the like shadow side of commit and then figure it out. So sometimes like it's not the right thing. But I will say, like, I think part of that was realizing that I didn't have sufficient passion because there were other things that were sort of equally as time consuming. And it was like, oh no, I'll figure out how to do
Yeah.
this. So,
Yeah, that's excellent advice. Thank you for sharing that. Hope a lot of people really take that to heart. Well, let's get into 1% for the Planet. So, for those who haven't heard of it, it is a powerhouse network of businesses and environmental organizations such as Patagonia, Puka, Tea, Flickr, all things I love and enjoy, and driving a lot of impact. But I would much rather hear you talk about 1%. So, tell us about both the origin story and mission as well as your role there.
yeah, so we were founded in 2002 by Yvon Chouinard, who I mentioned, and his friend Craig Matthews, and they were fishing on the Madison River in Montana. And both of them, Yvon Chouinard is the founder of Patagonia. Craig ran a company called Blue Ribbon Flies. So they both owned companies, and they both gave back through those companies because they believed that that was important to do. But as they were having this fishing moment on the river, they realized that essentially one-off companies giving back didn't really matter. If it's just these sort of isolated incidents, it makes a difference, but it doesn't really make the change at the scale that, would kind of matter in the ways that they wanted it to. So they created 1% for the Planet to build a movement of these business change makers so that it would aggregate into creating that impact at scale that does matter. And so that's us. So 1% for the Planet founded in 2002 as a movement builder. And the way it works is that we have companies. Now we have close to 5,000 companies all over the world, every single one of them, and they're across all different sectors, all different revenue sizes. It's a really diverse group of companies, but they're united around a commitment and a certified annual implementation of giving 1% of their revenues to environmental partners. And the work that we do is to engage those companies, to advise them on their giving strategies, to vet the nonprofit partners and then to certify the giving. We don't operate as a foundation, so the money doesn't come to us and then we distribute it. We facilitate and support the companies in making their direct donations. So they're developing these awesome
Mhm.
partnerships directly with the recipients, and then we certify it. So you mentioned the logo earlier. That logo means that this company is doing exactly what they say they're doing, which is they're annually giving that 1%. And at this point, I mentioned we have close to 5,000 companies we've certified over our lifetime. We've certified about 700 million US dollars, and our big goal is to get to a billion US dollars and to get kind of build the system that can get to the next billion and the next billion of solutions investments faster and faster.
Wow. Amazing. And how long have you been there?
I have been here 11 years.
11 years. Okay. So it's a very bold mission to inspire business to prioritize people and the planet. You've been with them for 11 years. How we've seen certainly a lot of change in 11 years. So, how have you seen the movement grow and change?
It's been really exciting and fun to see and try to make sense of the changes. So I think some of the things that we have seen and that we have been part of, because I think it's a system, so they're like external and like internally driven forces that all kind of come together. But one is, you know, kind of ebbs and flows, but really more like increase in consumer interest in having their purchasing dollars drive change. So for most people, myself included, our opportunities to have our dollars impact change is not through being philanthropists, because, the majority of people are not like big
Sure.
donors. Um, but we buy groceries, we, buy clothing, we buy shampoo, all the things that we purchase. And if we can feel like and have it be true that our purchases can be part of not only like stocking our pantry, but also creating a better world, like that's awesome. And I think increasingly consumers have seen and wanted that. I think concurrently with that, consumers have wanted to make sure that it's for real. So
Mm.
consumers are appropriately skeptical, and so they want to know that if they think that their dollars are driving change, they want it to be verified. So that has been one trend that's, I think we've both contributed to and benefited from is like we are kind of the opposite of greenwashing. So
Mhm.
greenwashing is essentially a term that's, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, that's applied to companies that seek to like look like they're doing things that are positive for the environment, but they're really not doing that much, that there's a mismatch between the claim and the actual, action. And 1% for the planet is the opposite of that. Anyone who's bearing our logo is doing exactly what they're saying they're doing because we're certifying it. We're the third party that's saying, yeah, this is what's happening. It's credible, not just that they're actually doing the 1%, but that we're vetting the partners that they're giving to so we can, affirm that the dollars and resources are going to good causes. So I think that consumer trend is one piece of
Mhm.
it. Um, I think that that's the kind of business response to that has been the growth
Yeah.
of the sort of social enterprise kind
Mhm.
of sustainable business sector. Um, and, an increasing, and it again, there's ebb and flow in this one, and I would say it's more volatile than the like consumer intent. But there, businesses seeing that it can be not just a good thing to do, but good for business
Mhm.
to set up their business uh, focus on all of the underlying things that, ha ensure that they are having a lighter footprint on the planet and a more positive impact. And again, that has, I would say varied more just with, we've been around for as since 2002, as I said, and we've had recessions, natural disasters, different in the US, Republican, Democrat elections globally, all sorts of different like kind of political instabilities, stability, global conflicts. Like 1% for the planet has like been around through
Yeah.
it all, and we have grown consistently through it all. And there's been, a lot of variability politically, economically, socially throughout all of that. And so I think, though those surrounding trends, definitely have an impact on whether people or businesses feel that they have 1%
Mhm.
available to allocate. But one thing we have seen and that we really believe in is that we're kind of built for uh, providing an action option in a volatile dynamic world. And, so I would say that is a way in which we're kind of in conversation with both consumers and businesses, as we navigate the path
Yeah.
forward.
For sure. Well, you mentioned 5,000 around the world. Where are, outside of the US, we have a global audience, so where are some of the areas that are growing in the movement more quickly?
Yeah, and we have more businesses outside of the US than in the
Ah,
US. So I think for this audience, I think that's
yeah.
important to hear. Our headquarters in the US, but we're truly a global
Okay.
network. The biggest geographies outside of the US are the UK, Europe, Australia. Japan is sort of on the rise. And then, we're spread across, I don't know what the latest number is, but upwards of like 60 to 70 countries.
Wow, congratulations. Um, and while we all may aspire to be Patagonias, we're not all there yet. So I'd like to ask you kind of a little, I guess, a case study from both your business community and the nonprofit community. What are people, give me an example or two from each category of what people are getting out of the community, what you're seeing as impact.
Yeah, and I love the that you sort of reference that we're not all Patagonia because I think that's really important. We really believe in progress, not perfection. So, we have geographic diversity of members, but we also have members who are in very different kind of places on the journey as
Right.
companies. And we love that because our theory of change is that simple actions done repeatedly in community are how we drive change at scale. If we were just to focus on companies that were, quote, perfect, kind of why bother? So we really, really believe in like, hey, if 1% for the planet is a first step that you can take, that is so awesome. We're so excited to be a way that you can take that first step. If it's the 25th step that you take and you're doing so many amazing things, that's also great. We can all like be in it together. So, we an example of kind of how our companies and our nonprofits are benefiting from and like leaning into 1%. One example would be a large company that joined us and they'd never done a, an ounce of philanthropy, a dollar of philanthropy before. And for them, 1% was a big
Yeah.
number. And so we were able to work with them to help them sort of take their brand and strategy pillars and kind of uh, graft those onto a philanthropy strategy that they could then, implement and talk about and, integrate into their overall strategy. And it's been really amazing. We've learned a lot and they've done just a beautiful job with that. And, so truly it's not like you have to come to us with it all
Yeah.
figured out. You get to figure it out, as part of the journey together. And for many of our companies, it's like they join and it's not like you get it dialed in year one, you're like, you do certify every year, but over 2, 3, 4, 5 years, you really evolve the strategy and are able to kind of access the like deeper layers of benefits. So we hear from companies that their employees are more engaged because they believe in what the company is doing with its 1% commitment. So there's the employee piece, there's brand loyalty that's secured with consumers. They, start thinking about things that they hadn't thought about before. So it's like 1% for the planet serves as this stepping stone into sort of subsequent considerations. Like we have this one company that's been a great member for many years, consistently certifying, doing their giving. And on top of that, they've realized like, oh, actually, we have a lot of plastic. Let's get rid of that. Oh, actually, we could sort of develop a new manufacturing process
Wow.
and eliminate plastic from our products. So we don't certify all of that, but it becomes part of the opportunity once you kind of step onto the journey. On the environmental partner side, and we use that language just because
Mhm.
globally
Sure.
nonprofits are not is
Yeah.
not the term that's used. We have developed a kind of framework for impact. So we have four impact areas: just economies, resilient communities, rights to nature, and conservation and restoration. And really that's like how our environmental partners are categorized, but also how the giving lands. So that's kind of the nexus where the members and the partners come together. All of the impact resources and all of the
Mhm.
solutions we're investing in are in those four impact areas. So I think that's been really a powerful way for us to articulate a point of view around the ways in which environment is connected to people, is connected to environment, is connected to people. Like we're all, integrated. And so we really have, that's been a really powerful tool for us. And so on the environmental partner side, we've seen, we have about 7,000 nonprofits actually, and most of, I would say the biggest like kind of takeaway there is that most of the giving that happens pretty locally. And a lot of times there are, pretty small nonprofits who are doing really innovative work. And a lot of times we're able to help companies to find partners that they wouldn't have found on their own, that are doing really interesting work that's very aligned with either the geography or the particular issue that the company cares about.
That's fantastic. Always better when people can meet and know each other and see the impact in their own community as well. I love that you brought up the fact that, especially with a large company that didn't have any philanthropic endeavors and came to you and you kind of helped figure it out alongside them. So, what about companies that may be listening who are interested but haven't made the leap yet? What is the advice you would give them to either here's where we recommend you get started, or is it just starting a conversation with you? But what can lead from interest to action?
Yeah, that's a great way to ask that question. And I would say like definitely reach out and have a conversation with us because, that is again with the like progress, not perfection. We actually love it when companies come to us and they're like, we are just at the beginning of our journey. Because then we can be like, great. Like, what are you trying to figure out? What are you trying to solve for? And that's where some of the like employee engagement or brand storytelling, or every company has a slightly different matrix. And what 1% for the Planet offers is a way to join a community and sort of be in community with a bunch of other really interesting, diverse brands under this one kind of shared commitment, but to differentiate around the particular giving. No two companies across our whole network have exactly the same giving strategy. And
Yeah.
so, it's really fun to figure out with a company like what do you want to solve for? And one thing too is that the way we are set up is there's some flexibility in the models, so companies can allocate in-kind donations, volunteer time. There's different ways to configure that 1%, and it's really fun and valuable for us to have those conversations. Also, last thing I'll say is like when a company starts the conversation, you don't have to give your 1% immediately. So when you join, you have that first year to really figure it out. So it's not like you have to have it all dialed in to
Yeah.
join as a member.
And you mentioned a couple of things there, employee engagement, you mentioned retention, uh, hiring, all of those kinds of things. There are a lot of different strategies that can, one may be of a higher interest to a company over another. Um, so have you found to be some of the most influential or inspiring ways to get companies to think about environmental sustainability with regards to their own model?
Yeah, I think that's where it really comes down to, you know, the differentiation opportunity is really like every company gets to figure out again, their particular matrix. And so I think what we really value is like, I think sometimes people can think environmental sustainability means this. And
Right.
what we try and say is, what does it mean for you? And we have a model that's highly credible. We have four impact areas. So we have a clear like point of view within which there's a ton of room for companies to sort of figure out what does their path look like. So I do think my like advice to companies would be like, ask yourself the question, like, what are you trying to solve for? What do you want to create? What are opportunities that you would like to see integrated? And start to think about like, what would it look like if sort of having a positive impact for planet and people was not an add-on if you have extra time or money at the end of the year, but an integrated part of your overall strategy. How does it fuel the things you're trying to solve operationally? How does it create a new opportunity for brand storytelling? How does it connect with some of the employee engagement issues you might be struggling with? How does it help you with hiring? Like, sort of have those like what if questions of like, what if we solved for XYZ or invested in XYZ, not through, the traditional business things that we might be thinking about, but through seeing this as a core investment. So one thing that I like to, or one way I like to frame it is like, if you're sort of thinking about growing a great business, you immediately think about how am I going to invest in my staff? How am I going to invest in the kind of assets that I need to drive the business, whether those are, intellectual or sort of physical assets. Planet Earth and sort of healthy ecosystems of planet and people should be an asset that you consider investing in right alongside those other things. Because if we don't invest in those positive solutions, we're going to lose the other two. Like, people that we hire want to be part of something that's creating a better world. So I do think like really kind of challenging ourselves to ask the questions that get us thinking about business differently in the sense that we bring in planet and people as one of the kind of fundamental assets that we need to invest in order to have a thriving business.
Mhm. Absolutely. Thank you for that. And so, kind of similarly and along those lines, we're also, of course, seeing a lot of companies roll back their net zero targets, their sustainability initiatives, very disheartening. But I'm curious, what still gives you hope at times like this? It may be from your own experiences or from what you're hearing from members.
Yeah, I would say what gives me hope are a couple things. One is just our members. We have a strong base of members who are sticking with their commitments. And, we've had like strong renewals in the first quarter of this year. So very clear signal of that commitment. So that certainly gives me hope. And I would say at a kind of deeper level, what gives me hope is the underlying values that are guiding that, because I think those values are durable no matter what words we apply to
Yeah.
them. So I think that's something that's really important to remember. I think the rollbacks that we're seeing seem to have more to do with kind of surface language articulation commitments that may not have been embedded in deeper ways, whereas what we see across 1% for the planet is that we, and again, the the way we articulate our impact areas, the way that we are thinking about driving sort of global positive outcomes for a planet and people, those are primarily values driven and durable beyond the kind of volatility of,
Right.
of the dynamic system that we will always live in. It will always be volatile in
Yeah.
certain ways. So I really think like peeling back the layers and getting really clear on, and we're seeing this with our members, and this gives me a great deal of hope is, that they have commitments that are really really strong and deep and that will thrive and last.
For sure. Yes. That Thank you. That's a very great way to put it, and definitely a hopeful outlook. Well, this episode will debut during April, which is Earth Month. So we are delighted to have you in this month with us. So no matter your B2B, your B2C, every company is made up of people. So no matter what your company is doing, people have, of course, you mentioned earlier, we every day we purchase things, we can get out in nature. There are always lots of advice, good advice, small steps that people can take, but I'm curious to hear your perspective. So, how can individuals contribute to sustainability efforts with their professional background, just with their trips to the grocery store or getting outside? What are some of your favorites?
I think one of the most important things to me always and certainly right now is just like break it down. I think for a lot of people, and I would put myself in this category, it can be easy, it's easy to get overwhelmed. Like,
Sure.
big challenges, like what can little old me do? And so I would say, like, break it down and don't discount the small actions. And those small actions, I'm really glad you brought up just like getting outside, because I do think like fueling what keeps us going. So I know for me, like getting outside, like seeing the stars, being out in the sun, like, and it doesn't have to be big wilderness. Like go to the park, walk on your sidewalk and notice the buds coming out on a tree at this time of year in the northern hemisphere. Um, and know that like that connection gives you a little bit of energy to then like think about when you go to the grocery store, like what you purchase or what like little step that you can take and, believe that that matters. And at the same time, also know that our individual actions aren't the things like bringing the house down.
Yeah.
There are some bigger actors who are driving most of the changes. So, like, understanding the power of your individual actions, but also not walking around with sort of shame and guilt for your individual actions. We all live in a system. There are bigger forces than each of us in terms of where we get our electric supply, for example, or what access we may or may not have to more renewable energy sources. So, like, giving yourself some grace to recognize that those are things that you may not control. If you're someone who likes to, like, sign a letter or petition or has a local politician who you're comfortable talking to, that's something that you can do in
Right.
any country. But, everyone's different. And I think finding those like individual actions that enable you to feel kind of fueled for the long journey. Because again, 1% for the planet, I think even though it's not we don't have individual members, it does create a really, really awesome example of little actions add up because our 700 million that we've achieved to date is made up not of a few big donors giving their multi-million dollar donations. It's made up of literally hundreds of thousands of donors over the years, allocating everything from single digit dollar
Yeah.
donations to much bigger donations and it adds up. Like we are proof of concept of the fact that individual actions, small steps do result in big change.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Has been so fun, but I can't, you've been at this for over, the organization has for over 2 decades, so I can't get away without asking you what's next? What's on the horizon? What can we expect?
Well, we couple of things. I mentioned earlier that we are aiming for that 1 billion in lifetime giving and then
Yes.
really accelerating from there. So just continuing to be a source of real investment in solutions. A couple of years ago, we launched our Planet Impact Fund, which is another option for individuals. It's a donor platform where you can donate and your dollars are invested for positive impact. And then we make a annual donation to a portfolio of nonprofits. So that's on our
Mm,
website. That's something
okay.
that people can check out. And that's something we'll be growing as we look ahead. And then, we're always looking at, the world is changing. I've mentioned that many times. We're very cognizant of living in a dynamic
Surprise. Yeah.
context. Yeah, so we're always looking at, how do we need to adapt? So we are looking at some of our certification and what are the things that fit within our impact model. So stay tuned because we are, there are some evolutions coming there to enable us to just drive that much more meaningful impact.
Perfect. This has been such a gift. Thank you. You had a great way of, I think, kind of one of the last things you said, it is such a big topic. Sometimes we do feel like a little bitty cog in a giant machine. And one, do we make a difference? Can we make a difference? And, unfortunately, the news is just so often so negative as well. So you kind of, want to give up or not really, start to question your own abilities and your own choices and things like that. So thank you for making it very approachable for both individuals and businesses. I really appreciate that. And so, as we wrap up, how can people find you and the organization?
Yeah, so we are at 1%fortheplanet.org, which is all spelled out in letters. And on that, you can, essentially, I would say if you are interested in action, it's a great place to go.
Yeah.
Like we think of ourselves as the like action team. Like if you're sort of wherever you are in the world, wherever, whatever you're thinking or feeling, you can come to 1% for the planet and find a way to take positive action. And that's, really what we stand for. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I do respond, maybe
Yeah,
not
I can
immediately, but I
attest.
do.
That's how we met.
That's right. I do respond to people on LinkedIn. And it's always helpful for me if you identify like, hey, I heard you on this podcast, because
Yeah,
helps me to sort of filter through. So you can just look for me on LinkedIn, Kate Williams, and it's I don't think it should be too hard to find me. So yeah, please
perfect.
be in touch.
Awesome. Well, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much. We've had some good conversations behind the scenes, so I'm really glad to bring this to the public now and encourage people to use whatever they have to put it toward a greater good. And please encourage your company to check out 1% for the planet. And as she said, you don't have to start immediately, but you can take a step in that right direction. So thank you for being here. Kate, thank you for listening in to our beloved audience, and we will have another amazing conversation in 2 weeks. So be sure to hit that subscribe button. Thanks so much.